Hello everyone, welcome back to Call of Duty DFS Esports Breakdown for July the 8th. Should be a pretty interesting one. There's a couple spots I'm thinking about here, so we'll go ahead and look into it. But quickly we'll recap the past matches, as we do. Ended it off with a New York upset over Optic, so pretty solid stuff here. Pretty happy about that. Targeted players Hydra and Paul, and they ended up performing well as well, so good start there. LA Thieves got the 3 over Paris, and the players we targeted here did well as well. Draza and Octane ended up having a pretty great day overall, as you guys could probably have imagined. Thieves were a gigantic favorite here. There's nothing to talk about too much in this one, but Boston, I believe, ended up as the slight favorite in this one, and they ended up getting the job done themselves also, and the players we targeted pretty well here as well, outside of Vivid, but Narrow and TJ Halley specifically were, ones we were talking about, and they both ended up doing pretty well. Methods was okay. He would have been fine with him as well, but I don't think we were on him, so there's not much point there. So end of the day, 3-0, and I believe that Saturday before that Sunday we had a 3-1, which is a pretty good day as well. So I have a feeling we have a pretty good read, I think, on the league and the teams and stuff as a whole for right now. So hopefully we can continue to go ahead and translate that into looking ahead to tomorrow. So should be a pretty interesting one. The first series up is London, the London Royal Ravens against the Atlanta FaZe. Pretty intriguing one. Honestly, I'm a little surprised that FaZe is like a minus 200 favorite here. I don't think that they've been playing that great as of late. London have been looking pretty good. I don't know what justifies this price tag, to be honest. I know FaZe are FaZe. They've been in the finals of every major. They're a perennial dynasty. They've been looking extremely strong. There's nothing to there's not a lot to take away from them. However, they just have not been looking great, especially their respawns. They've been heavily dependent on the search and destroys. London has been winning hard points in the search and destroys. Their control is pretty suspect, which definitely is a cause for concern. However, them being 6-0 in the hard points is pretty inspiring. FaZe 2-3 in the hard points. They've played pretty weak competition as well. LAG, Toronto, and LA Thieves. Like London, on the other hand, they've played Toronto as well, and then Minnesota and Florida. Not exactly the greatest competition for either side. However, I just think London have looked a lot better. Overall, lately, they've been pretty impressive. They're really coming together as a team at the moment, and I feel like FaZe have not been looking that great. So off the bat, I'm just a little surprised by this price. Honestly, I'm just not there with FaZe here. We know the upside and the potential with this team. They're, if you guys know Call of Duty at all, you know FaZe and you know how dominant they can be. It's definitely risky for that reason. It's a new week. We don't know what's going to happen, obviously, but they've just been looking shaky, even online especially. They've dropped a couple series here and there, despite them being pretty large favorites relatively often. Even before this LAG series, I'm not overreacting to this one. I didn't think they looked that great against Thieves, or even, they looked decent against Toronto. They've just not been looking great, and I think London have, and especially in the respawn game modes as well. We could just see here, FaZe are 2-3 in hardpoint. London are 6-0. FaZe are 1-2 in control. London are 0-3 in their own right, so it's not a great spot either, but both teams are bad in control. London is pretty good in hardpoint. FaZe is not that great in hardpoint, so I do think this is going to be a pretty close series overall. However, I do like London's ability to go ahead and grab the respawns, and I do think specifically with how poorly Arskies and Abizi have been playing, I think you could definitely get some good value from the London side. Specifically, Zero has been playing incredibly well as of late. His KD right now is 1.52 for the last couple matches in hardpoint. He's pretty cheap at 74, so I think you could definitely mix in a couple, pretty much all the London guys. We've seen them pop all over here and there. It's pretty much been Zero and then one of the other three, so there's a lot of options for them. So you can mix and match any of the London players. We'll talk about the players specifically at the end, but I like London here. This is a pretty good spot, and again, I'm just not too convinced by this price tag on FaZe. I think it should be slight favorite FaZe maybe just because of the pedigree and the skill that they have. But I think minus 200 is a little egregious. I think you could say FaZe is like minus 140-ish, maybe minus 150. And I think that would be a little bit fairer, but again, minus 200, that's a little crazy. I'm going to go with the London side on this one for sure. Florida versus Paris. This one is going to just be Florida here. It sucks that we're kind of in this state now where Paris are just kind of a free win. They've just been oh, sorry. Quickly before we transition, I forgot to do maps. But maps are not good here. This is the first series, so we will know maps in advance. However, London typically banned the Bocage. Atlanta FaZe typically banned the Berlin. And London usually like to go to the Tuscan or the Berlin, so we know London's going to pick Tuscan. So I think the picks and bans are pretty straightforward here. We should see Berlin and Bocage banned, and I think FaZe will go to the Gavutu and London will go to the Tuscan. And I do think London is actually a pretty decent Tuscan team. Like if we do look back to like the Major 2 qualifiers, they were 3-1 on that as well. Maybe we could go back to Major 1 qualifiers, because I think this is mostly when Zero was playing with the full team. So this is the times I think when London had their full roster, and as you guys could tell, they're pretty strong in the hard points. Tuscan very strong, Gavutu very strong as well. So I'm not scared of the maps too much here. Tuscan pretty good, Gavutu pretty bad. So on the map scale, we do have the number 2 and the number 4 map. So it's pretty average, all things considered, or maybe a little bit below average. But I'm not scared of it too much here. Again, I still think FaZe have the potential to they can lay some eggs from here and there. So I'll go with a pretty good spot here for London, and yeah, and map's not the best, so move on here. Paris versus Florida. Again, as I was kind of alluding to a second ago, just have not seen much from Paris. Like we talk about it every time. They're obviously on like a I don't even know how many series win streak this is, or loss streak this is now. 9, 10. They're on a 10 series loss streak. They've won one match against another CDL team in the Pro-Am Classic, and that goes back pretty far. So they're just hopeless at this point. As much as it sucks to say, I do like some of the players on Paris. You just kind of can't ignore it at this point. They're just pretty hopeless. Outside of Temp, it seems like even Gravity hasn't been playing that well lately. It's definitely a lot of Temp and Gravity. However, again, Gravity hasn't been playing well. Johnny's not performed in the CDL at all. Jimbo has kind of had up and down, but however, he's still... my apologies. Jimbo still had ups and downs, but again, he's not been doing much lately, for them. So it's tough, but I'm just going to have to go with Florida. Probably just a 3-0 here as well, maybe a 3-1. Maybe Paris sneak a map or something. It can happen. Call of Duty is pretty random, I think, at the moment, but it's really tough to try to justify anything else here. Just with the stuff we've been seeing on Twitter from Temp, he's just talking about not even playing the rest of this weekend, how mentally draining it is for him just to show up knowing you're going to get demolished and lose. It's pretty disheartening, I would have to imagine, for him. So just with all the things, it looks like Florida's just kind of already kicked in the, threw in the towel, and I think this one's probably just going to be pretty handily for Florida. And Florida needs the win as well. That's something we... didn't talk about. I mean, I'm sure all the teams maybe outside of Paris are still playing for stuff, but if we look at CDL standings, so if we look at the overall standings from the whole league, obviously we have like FaZe and Optic, Seattle, London, Boston. It makes relative sense. The cutoff note. Geez, sorry, I don't know. I cannot talk. The note that we should make here is that only top 8 teams qualify for the major, and we have a pretty congested area here from pretty much 11 all the way to maybe like 5 or so. Boston's been not looking the best. Toronto's been waning. LAG's been waning. Minnesota's on the up. We know New York's on the up as well. Like all these teams are playing for something for sure. So it's going to be intriguing. Paris is obviously all the way already out of it. They've won 2 series out of 22. It's just pretty diabolical from them. So it's something to keep in mind. Like, although Florida's playing against Paris, they still need these wins. They need to get a good scoreline here. All these matches matter, even if you're going against Paris. So I don't think there's any like motivation question marks here as well. So, probably spent too much time talking about this one when I think it is pretty straightforward. But, just want to make sure everything is clear here for that one. So I think the most intriguing one here coming up is Minnesota versus Seattle. I do think, I forgot to do map set here for Florida Paris. So my apologies on that. We know Paris like to get to the Bocage, so it definitely opens up pretty good possibilities here. Like, we do look and see that's been one of their most played maps for sure. Florida typically don't ban it. They haven't been playing well on it. I'm not sure if Florida care enough to ban the Bocage. Like, again, I don't think they're necessarily scared of Paris's Bocage, but you could argue that it's probably just the safest option. That's probably the only map Florida look decent on it, that Paris look any level of competitiveness on is Bocage. So you could make an argument that Florida should probably ban it. However, it's their least banned map, typically. So it could be there. However, I think Paris is probably going to ban the Kavutu. That's one of their more banned maps, and it's a really strong statistically strong for Florida. So I think it would make sense for Paris to go ahead and ban the Kavutu, which opens up a really, really strong possibilities for the map set, in my opinion, which is why I'm definitely willing to lock and load a good amount of Florida in pretty much all facets. I think the Bocage and Tuscan are pretty likely. I don't think either team necessarily loves the Berlin. So we could definitely see Florida go ahead and ban the Berlin back, and if that's the case where Florida banned Berlin because that's one of their worst maps, they just would rather not play it, and Paris probably banned the Kavutu, which is again a map they typically ban, and Florida's good on. I could definitely see this going to the Bocage Tuscan, and that is an extremely juicy map set for Florida. So in all facets, I'm willing to lock and load Florida in just troves. Minnesota, Seattle, pretty interesting one. As I alluded to, we had some ups and downs from Florida. Obviously, they were or from Minnesota. Actually, from both these teams, we've had some ups and downs. My apologies. My nose is getting a little stuffy here, so try to get through this bit as quick as possible. Obviously, Minnesota were looking good. They were 5-0 last split. They came into this one, beat Texas, and they had this huge letdown versus Florida, and then they ended up losing again to London. Meanwhile, on the Seattle side, they were the exact same scoreline. They were 5-0. They didn't fully win out last time out, but they were winning a lot. Obviously, won the major 3 tournament, came in, beat Paris, and then lost to Boston and New York as well. So pretty similar stuff for both sides here. Obviously, I would say New York and London are pretty similar skilled teams. I would say Florida and Boston are pretty similarly skilled teams. However, the win over Texas definitely matters for Minnesota, and Seattle only really has that win over Paris. I think the odds here are about right. This one is just very, very tough to tell. Maybe after we look at the map set a little bit, we'll have a little bit clearer of a picture. But I think you could definitely look at both sides in this one for sure. We've seen incredible numbers from a lot of these players. Obviously, like Pred and Sib have been 2 of the statistically most dominant players in the whole league. Same with Attach. So that's one way you could look at it, is just don't worry too much about who's winning or losing, and just try to play the good individual players from this series. You could get both sides in. I think that would definitely make sense as well. I definitely think that's a viable strategy. But if we look into the picks and bans here, Minnesota typically ban either the Gavutu or the Tuscan Hardpoint. They like to leave open the Berlin and the Bocage. And then we know Seattle's map set is obviously very, very ideal. They like the Bocage, they like the Tuscan, they ban the Gavutu. So I would expect Seattle probably to go ahead and ban the Gavutu. Minnesota, it's not the best, but they'll probably in turn go ahead and ban the Tuscan. But that leaves us with a Bocage and a Berlin, and I do think that those are fine maps for both teams. However, I think in this scenario, I'm probably just going to have to lean towards the Minnesota side, as maybe a little bit surprising to you guys. Um, it does worry me a little bit, but I think more specifically when we look at like maybe the major four qualifiers, Seattle has just not been winning hard points, and they're not winning Berlin and Bocage, and that's mainly what it comes down to. Maybe I can't imagine Seattle would ban Berlin. That is their second most banned map, but I don't think Minnesota are scared of going to the Gvutu either. I don't know. There is potential here for Seattle to go ahead and bend Berlin, but then they both go to the Gvutu, and that's not that great really for either side. So I'm not sure. That could be a little bit more open. However, I would much favor the Minnesota assault rifles on Gvutu. Um, Attach obviously is one of the strongest ARs in the entire game at the moment, and Gvutu is a very AR dominated map. Meanwhile, if we look on the Seattle side, Pred and Sib, I believe, aren't they? I think they're both sub players. I should definitely know this, but off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you. I think Pred is a sub, and I think Sib may be a flex. I should definitely know this. But I know accuracy is the main AR, but I don't know who's the secondary AR in Seattle. Either way, but I would much favor attach over accuracy as the main AR on a map like Gavutu. So I think it would be wise of Seattle not to go there, but they're kind of in a pinch either way. So they go to the Bocage most likely, and then it's either the Berlin or the Gavutu, where I think Seattle's outgunned on both. So I would slightly favor Minnesota in that sense as well. Control is going to be pretty close. It's going to be a close series. I did think this is one you could go either way. You could maybe even play both sides. Probably not in the same lineup, but it is Bocage. We could definitely see those things happen. We've seen Mac not perform well online for a while now. Sib's not been cooling off a little bit. Pred has still been playing incredibly well. I just think overall, I favor the Minnesota side a little bit here, and I think the price is pretty fair. However, I'm just slightly leaning towards the Minnesota side, for those reasons I just gave, where I think Berlin and Gavutu, the map options that Minnesota have are just in their favor a good bit. And we could be insane maps. We could get the Berlin Bocage combo, which would be incredibly strong for Minnesota. And in the series as a whole, for DraftKings purposes, the Bocage Gavutu is a kind of because we know the Bocage is really good, but we know the Gavutu is really bad, so they in a way equal each other out. So the upside is there, but the downside is there as well. Back and forth. So that'll be the way I'm leaning in terms of the teams. But we'll go ahead and look at the players and get out of here. Florida is simply mispriced here. That's a little odd. Actually, no, they're not. Paris is just super cheap. Major Maniac is probably a little cheap, but Awakening and Skies are pretty expensive. That makes sense. Minnesota's pretty underpriced. Priesta and Havoc, Attach even at 7.8. Minnesota's definitely mispriced here. They should definitely be a lot more. Granted how close the series is. Maybe for that reason, you could definitely make an argument that it's probably a little bit better to go towards the Seattle side. I don't know. This one is just super interesting to me because we know New York has been pretty good online, but losing to that Boston one and their only win is over Paris. I don't know. Seattle's just so up and down. It's really, really hard to tell. And then same for Minnesota. Like they came in, they beat Optic Texas, looked pretty good, and they got swept by Florida, and they lost to London themselves. Again, I don't think New York beating Seattle and London beating Minnesota is that big of a deal. I do think New York and London are both pretty solid teams. So it's hard to tell. I think this is definitely just a really close series, and you could go either way. However, I do think, again, kind of looking at this pricing, you could probably make a good case to go to the Seattle side, just because they're probably they are overpriced. Minnesota is underpriced, and you could definitely probably get a good ownership and leverage going to the Seattle side. Like if we are going to London, which is pretty cheap, and if we're going to, I guess Florida's not cheap unless you get Major Maniac in there, but either way, like if you're going to get London cheapies and then pay up for Florida, it's going to be tough to try to get in a Seattle like 10Ks, and especially playing both of them. So that's tough. I do think that maybe the leverage spot could be there. I think people are going to own a lot of Minnesota because it is close. Their numbers are really good, all that kind of stuff. But we'll go ahead and look. We'll start off by looking at London and Florida first, because I do think those are probably two very strong options. So Zero's numbers are pretty crazy. Nasty's a little bit below him. Obviously, I do think Florida's numbers are going to be much better because they are going against a really bad team. So it's Awakening, then Skies, then Major Maniac, and then Two Real would be the one I would leave off, obviously. So yeah, I mean that's pretty straightforward. I do think that's about what it looks like. Zero, then Nasty, and then looks like Gizmo and Afro are kind of interchangeable. I still think last time out, Nasty was actually pretty under-owned, so maybe he was a pretty good player to target and try to get a little bit overweight on. I don't think people are adapting enough to Afro and his I don't want to say poor play because he's still been playing pretty well. However, his numbers are just not up to what we were expecting from him. So I think maybe going lower on Afro and then higher on Nasty is a good adaptation to look at. But then if we look at just the last series, Minnesota and Seattle, we could see that, Pred's been playing extremely well. Attach has been playing pretty good. Havoc is there as well. Obviously, if we look at pricing, Pred is 10K, Attach is 7.8, and Havoc is 6.2. So the pricing is pretty crazy. I do think there's a few players I would probably try to look to avoid. I think Standy and Mac would probably be the two I would try to avoid from this series. Accuracy is pretty hit or miss, but he's pretty cheap, so you could definitely get there. I think you could justify going to all of Attach, Priesta, Havoc, Accuracy, Sib, and even Pred. So that in reverse, I think Pred and then maybe even Sib. Although, again, Sib's numbers have not been great lately. We know what he can do if we look back to the Major 3 qualifiers. Obviously, his numbers were up there with the best, so we know his potential is there. He just not been playing well, so there's definitely upside for Seattle in that sense. You could probably get a pretty cheap ownership on Sib. I think you could get a really cheap ownership level on both Sib and Pred if you were to play them both, just because they are so expensive. People are probably going to want to get in the Florida guys. So I do think for that reason, you could probably get a good leverage spot on Seattle. I think I'm probably going to end up leaning that way, trying to get a little bit more Seattle into my lineups. It is going to worry me. Again, I do think this series is close. I typically have been riding Minnesota lately, and I've been fading Seattle lately, so it does feel a little bad. However, again, I just think this is a spot where it's pretty close. You could go either way, and I'm just going to try and play the leverage side here of Seattle, and I think that's the direction I'm going to be taking this one at. So, yeah, I do think that'll be it from me tonight. And I will see you guys again probably around the same time for the 4-gamer tomorrow on the 9th. Or not tomorrow, but tomorrow's video for the 9th slate. So that'll be it from me, and I'll see you guys then. I think that kind of takes care of it all. I guess quick map rundown: London, Atlanta, no Bocage. But I'm not too scared of the map set in that one. I think London can do well enough. Florida, Paris, again, we talked about it, but I think Bocage is pretty likely, so I like locking and loading a lot of Florida. Minnesota, Seattle, Bocage pretty likely, so I like going on both sides of this one. However, we can see that one kind of dip with the Gavutu, which worries me a little. But I think it could be pretty good for Minnesota as well, just because we've seen Seattle not perform well on the Berlin. So, there's options. Kind of laid them all out there. It doesn't feel great to get London in because they don't pay the Bocage, but, got to make sacrifices somewhere. So that'll be it for me tonight. Best luck to you guys all tonight, and I will see you guys again tomorrow.